They should have said the poet. The poet. They should have said the poet. The poet.
This is Sending Poets, a podcast about ideas. Our goal is to understand metaphorical truths within the beauty we find in the human experience. Sending Poets. NotebookLM's aid to craft a tale of terror, Pumpkinheads arise. Whoa. I didn't write that haiku. We used NotebookLM to write that haiku, and it did a wonderful job. That's too spooky. This is John, and I'm with Bob again here, continuing this Pumpkinheads NotebookLM thing. How's it going, Bob?
Hey, doing well.
Sweet. So so to follow up on last two episodes, we continued with generating conversations from NotebookLM. This time we added the second Callin episode. And again, like, it's just fascinating to see the iteration. I got a sense this time that the host conversation back and forth, it almost seems like they're more comfortable with the material. Like, I can tell, like, it sounds like these are people that have like read through this multiple times now, listened to these, podcasts and stuff. I felt like there was maybe more jokes this time around, and maybe even like just smoother back and forth. They didn't say like your notes this time. That was an interesting piece last time where they were talking about your notes, your concept, your stuff. This time they were talking about the writers. Yeah. So the first time was creators, then it was like very you specific, and now this time it was like the writers, which was interesting.
Yeah, I really liked the trajectory of not just familiarity of the content, but actually feeling like loosely familiar, like you're talking about, joking about it, injecting little extra bits of color into the picture. I find it fascinating. It's blown my mind.
Do you remember? I think it was in the beginning. One of the hosts says something like, get ready, this one's a doozy. And I remember thinking, like, is that a coincidence? Because there is a reference in the material, the source material, about this point of view thing being sort of a Groundhog Day, repetitive type of thing. But Groundhog Day is mentioned in at least one of the sources. But I don't know, probably a coincidence that it.
I'm gonna derail this conversation just for a little tiny second here. Do you know do you know what a doozy is?
No, I was gonna say the only thing that I think of when I hear doozy is Ned Ryerson and Groundhog Day. So no, yeah, what is a doozy?
A doozy is like an old timey classic car. So if you go into your handy dandy Google and look at it, and it's got like all these special features, like really cool. Like mirrors and pieces to it. I don't know all the things. You image it yourself. You'll see what I'm talking about.
How do you spell it? Because I tried DOOZY, but it must be, what is it, IE or something?
Well, now you stumped me. Thanks, John.
You're welcome.
I don't have an answer to that.
Okay, so just Googling doozy. I mean, again, just Googling doozy, it was all this other stuff. Googling doozy car. Now I see a whole bunch. Yeah, like is it like a roadster? Is that?
Yeah. I mean,
it's like a roadster type of thing.
It's like a very fancy car, not like a crappy one, like the guy who glues 10,000 pennies to his VW Bug or something. No, it's like, this is real good stuff. It's a doozy.
So I see multiple spellings: DOOZY, DOOZIE, DOOSIE. Oh, hey, I don't know if yeah, we're totally derailed, but this result here, I'm just looking at the images, but New Atlas, is that the website? Duesenberg Automobiles.
Duesenberg, there you go.
Is that where it comes from, I guess?
I believe it
Duesenberg
is.
Automobiles or Doozy?
Yeah, I did not do research.
Huh.
This was literally just off the top.
See, we can figure out stuff ourselves. We don't need the AI, which is it's fun to use the AI as a tool, but we can still figure stuff out ourselves.
What's so funny though is I bet you I didn't know about a doozy until recently. I can't remember how it came up even. It's so weird. But my point is I'd never heard about it prior to say a year ago, and you'd never heard of it. And I don't think I knew anybody else who knew the source of this thing my whole life. But here comes, NotebookLM for the win.
Right.
Dropping the doozy reference.
Yeah.
Back to Groundhog Day. Who knows?
Right. Who knows? Yeah. Could be a coincidence, but I remember thinking that like, ooh, they're very clever here. but whether it is a coincidence or not, again, it's the things that it says that these hosts say who are not people that sound so humanized. And one of those things was, I don't remember which host. And by the way, I guess we should have said, it does, every episode that we've generated so far, it does kind of start with this, like, this is a horror story. So that's very interesting that it's very, focused on the horror, as the main theme, I guess. I think maybe I'm jumping ahead here, but like the overall story, I don't know. I guess the Pumpkinhead story itself, you'd say, yeah, that's probably a horror story. Is that fair?
Here's what I think that's 100% fair. And here's one of the things that I think it points to a couple of times that I noticed. One is, they barely touch on, I think they say projectile vomiting. I can't remember what episode it was. They talked about projectile vomiting, but they stayed way away from, and they talked about being cunning and using cleverness as opposed to strength sometimes, which is different than other zombie genre canon, is that these creatures use high level intellect when they're physically weak. And my point was that in the past, it seems like the hosts had shied away from talking about those things, and I think they do categorize it as horror. But I think that the opening scene at the barbecue, now that's also about barbecue, at the barbecue, they figured that out, is my point. I think that was fascinating. We talked about, it started with BBQ, they talked about the BBQ,
right,
and now it's barbecue. So I like that they adapted that. But the point is that they don't ever really get into what happened with the first transmission that you see on camera when the guy gets seduced at the barbecue by neighborhood wife, and she ends up vomiting in his face to infect him. And he kind of dips out, and just that's kind of implied that this is happening everywhere all at once now. This is in real time, things are happening. And they don't ever express that they understand that. Going back to the mom, killing her own youngest child to prevent the horrors of being turned into a pumpkin head, only for that to not occur like she thought it was eminently going to occur. And all the they never talk about that. They kind of around the edges they talk about do they even say Sophie's Choice? I'm trying to remember now.
They do. Yeah, there was reference to Sophie's Choice. Yeah.
But was that in the sources? I can't recall. I don't remember.
Yeah,
I think it might have been.
Yeah, because last episode there was we were wondering the same thing about the trolley problem. Couldn't remember if we mentioned that in the sources or in those Callin episodes. This time, I don't think we talked about this. I don't remember reading about this in the sources. I don't think we talked about it, but maybe we did because it was a while ago. But this idea about we're only 9 meals away from anarchy.
Yeah.
Do you remember if you brought that up when we first talked about it?
I mean, I've talked about never meals. I've talked about 72 hours, 3 days. I talk about 3 days, and I think we've had that conversation. I've never said 9 meals.
Okay,
which I
cool.
think
Yeah.
is,
So I think
by
that
the way,
it
I think
definitely
that's
pulled it. You know.
I got to tip my hat here. I think that's the superior formulation of that statement, by the way. To say 3 days is not getting to the root of the matter. It's 9 meals. I mean, that is where
Yeah.
it's at. So, the crown champion, heavyweight champion right now is the Notebook LM. I bow before you.
Yeah.
New overlords, take
Yeah.
your time.
Yeah.
Humble
Yeah.
your
No,
humble
it
servant.
is. Yeah, it is. It is
I
really
saw
gnarly. Yeah.
T2. I saw T2 in the theaters. I was that young back in
Oh
the
yeah, me
day.
too. Me too. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, like, I get that feeling of like going back in time and getting the guy who's working on the first chip. You know what I mean? Like, this is that spooky feeling. Like, this could be that moment of, you're passing the threshold. You're going past, the crossing the Rubicon, and you don't understand the implications. It's too easy to slide right through the uh, the edge of the black hole and go past the event horizon into a place of no return. I mean, it just feels
Right.
like that, doesn't it? It feels just like that.
Wow. Yeah. So I mean I did Google the Nine Meals from Anarchy, and it is attributed to a American lawyer, journalist, and short story writer Alfred Henry Lewis from 1906. So like in Cosmopolitan, I guess that was a magazine back then, even, or newspaper back then, Cosmopolitan. But
Yeah.
1906, he wrote that. That's crazy. So, um, but yeah, so this horror stuff. One of the other things I pulled out here that what makes the AI say this? It goes again. I don't remember which host, but one of them says, "I can already tell this is going to be messing with my dreams tonight." Like, what do you mean? What dreams tonight? Like, why would an AI voice be like talking about their dreams? Dude, it's what is the short
I mean,
story? I think it's
why does it put a wrinkle on the face of a fake human that it made an image of? Like, I mean, it's just so perfect. It's doing
right.
what it's meant to do, which is just a output that tricks you into thinking a human did it. I mean, that's literally it's just
Yeah. By the way, that's a good time to mention. One of the reasons I was happy to put this in our podcast is because we are talking about, we're not, I feel like transparency is super important here. Like, this is for, in other words, like someone trying to pass this off as not AI, I think like that's just going to ruin it. It's like the bad apple spoiling the bunch. It's like, that's going to ruin it for everybody. That's why we can't have nice things. Like, don't do that. Just be transparent. Like, yes, this is AI generated.
The deepfakes are going to be atrocious, and the amount of term papers written are going to be atrocious.
Yeah.
And the amount of advertising, cutting actors out, voice actors and actual actors, and just AI, your next double mint gum commercial, if you will, like whatever that comes, that's coming, indistinguishable, right? Just
yeah. And
commercialization.
but I do think, we're going to get derailed here a bit, but that's okay. But I do think, I don't know, I think this, or I feel this, or I feel it because I think it, or I think it because I feel it. I don't know, but that like really the best stuff will be this combination of using humans and technology. I think that I think it's easy to just, quickly focus on like, yeah, AI could be putting people out of jobs, but man, I just don't think it's like going to be that black and white. And I think the real successful stuff, the real like powerful, interesting stuff is going to be this combination of real humans still, human ingenuity, creativity, physical humans, and technology. I think that if we were to eliminate the human element out of that equation entirely and it's all AI, clearly there'll be some impressive stuff, but I just don't think it's gonna like be as good as it would if it was this combination of both. That's just my stance right now. And again, I don't know if I think it because it feels good to think that, or if I'll
boil down the counter in 45 seconds or less.
Okay, the clock's running. So anyway,
Oh,
but yeah.
I digress then on behalf of my clock. No,
Yeah.
I think it's going to be humans or consumers. Okay, and my fear then is when we become the consumer component of the equation, all the production is offshore to silicon chips. I fear you end up with the behavioral sink phenomenon where you're evolved to solve problems. And when you become a strictly consumer based creature, things may go off the rails.
Yeah. Fair point. And in an interesting way, there is maybe kind of a theme of that in the overall Pumpkinhead's idea. Is it like we can share this now, right? Like you're thinking of this. I hope you're okay with me sharing it, but you're thinking of like a trilogy, like a huge story arc, and the Pumpkinheads is just the first part.
It is, exactly.
So there's like a second and a third part where this much bigger story, and that's why I was like interesting. It was interesting to me about Pumpkinheads being this horror thing because the second and third parts aren't. I wouldn't call them horror the way the Pumpkinheads is horror. They're more like science fiction. I mean, this whole story is going to span hundreds of years, so it's not like this, horror story that's hundreds of years long. It's this really big, epic concept, and it just happens to start with a sort of horror story.
Yeah, the meta level is going to be this mashup concept, and we've discussed this before. I think this is probably the best pitch of it is you have two dials, like hot water, cold water, and you're trying to make whatever output you want. In the three iterations, the hot water being horror and the cold water being sci-fi, it's like 95% cranked to horror and like 5% sci-fi. And then the second iteration would probably be about equal measures. And then the third is going to be very little horror, cranked all the way wide open on sci-fi.
Yeah.
So, that is, and then the meta side of this is that when you meaning the consumer of this material, if you are consuming it in a fashion that is in and of itself encoded with trying to get you through a story arc, like some kind of terrible thing happens and then overcoming obstacles and then redemption at the end, some kind of generic 3-step process that humans love. This is supposed to be traumatic. This is supposed to jolt you up. You're supposed to not know what's happening. It's supposed to be a mystery. It's supposed to be you're empathizing with people who are realistic enough to have you consider them like yourself or vice versa, and you invest in their journey. And I think having absolute clarity and information, foreboding, foretelling, jumping ahead in the story, whatever you want to call it, would reduce that emotional impact of the story being about the first time these characters are encountering this phenomenon worldwide,
right.
And how traumatic that would be.
Yeah. Nice. Cool. Well, yeah. Anything else you want to say about this iteration of the conversation from NotebookLM?
I do. I have one last piece, specifically with a very small detail. So this is kind of like a Rorschach test or a litmus test or some kind of a proof of concept test, I believe. And that is how they brought up this WASP knife system thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if
Which, by the way, this time I think she pronounced it correctly. It wasn't WASP, but it was just WASP. Yeah.
So I think if my memory serves, and it could fail me at this moment, but my memory serves, I think it was originally an acronym. So I believe there were periods, WASP, with periods after each one. I believe was the original, because I did source this. And by the way, for all those interested, it is a real thing. It was not just created. It was an actual thing. I can't remember where I saw it from originally, but it was like either videos online or a commercial or something. I can't remember, of this guy who had this knife, and the knife and the handle, if you remember, like the old Rambo knife where you could unscrew the back of the handle and there's like a little fishing line, a little compass in there or something like that.
Yeah.
Like instead of that, it's got a CO2 cartridge. And then it's got a tube going from that CO2 cartridge up through the blade of the knife into the tip and a tiny little nozzle. And what happens is when this knife gets stuck in, there's like a little triggering mechanism. You fire that trigger, not only have you been stabbed, but it unloads an entire compressed air cartridge, compressed CO2, into whatever wound it just created. And that expansion event, if you know your physics, is a chilling one. In that, thank you, everybody. In that, as it expands, PV equals nRT is the whole point. As the volume increases, the temperature decreases. So it creates like a frozen gas-based explosive event. And so in the old videos, what I'm referring to, the guy would stick it into a watermelon, or he would stick it into a basketball or something, and then he would hit the trigger, and the thing would break into pieces, frozen pieces. It would like explode out, flash frozen. And he talked about, you could use this in the ocean if you're a surfer. A shark comes up to you, you hit him with this in the gut, pull the thing. Not only does it like kill the shark instantly, but it creates this giant buoyant pocket inside of it, and the thing will float away. Very, very memorable to me, and so I incorporated it into the story. But here's my point, long-winded as it is. The podcast, the AI podcasters did not understand it. They went with WASP, like a venom sting.
Yes, I remember that. You're right, yeah.
So I was very interested in that they went with a point of view on an uncertain topic. And I presume, like I said, this is a Rorschach test or the litmus test of how good it is. It hits this one point where we're using, and I wish I remember what the acronym stood for at this moment, but we're using this brand name, let's just say, called WASP. Has nothing to do with being stung or a venom injection.
Yeah.
But here's my point. Like, it's used instrumentally in defeating Pumpkinhead attacks, in that when you put this in their head and it explodes it's not gooey anymore. It's frozen into a solid, which protects the wielder of the knife. So that's the whole thing of the concept. It's like Excalibur's sword, right? This is like a magic thing. This is not just a regular thing. This is like imbuing the holder with magic powers.
Yeah.
But they didn't get it, John.
Right.
The host failed to.
Yeah. They hinted at, like, these aren't typical zombies where the headshot is how you kill them. They I think all three maybe of these episodes so far have said, like, if you headshot, it's gonna just exacerbate the situation because all these, like, parasitic.
I was impressed with that. Yeah, I was impressed with that. That's my point. It's like now adding this one piece that probably, let's talk about this for a second. Did we source very much? I don't think it was much at all. I know there was a link in the original thing, right? Because you read this as a blog post originally. There was a link in it to the guy's website.
Right, and that's definitely in the source. Not the link, sorry, but the text from that link that explains everything you just said about how this knife works, the compressed CO2. So yeah, it is interesting, and I think.
But we talked about it then, I would presume, as well in the podcast, and I don't think we ever talked about it other than doing this thing.
Yeah. So what maybe would have helped is if I would have had really good notes about what were in those Callin archives, but I don't. I just have like which links we talked through. So what'll be interesting is the next time we'll do at least one more of these, because there's a third Callin episode to.
This is based off of a translation, if you will, from YouTube, of a conversation, of a reading of a textual based source. Like I get you. I think is what you're saying. Like you're saying there's a lot of interpretations at this.
Well, that too, but I do what I was getting at is, like, I definitely remember us talking about this, the functionality of this WASP knife, and maybe it's in the third Callin episode, which we haven't uploaded yet. So that'll be interesting next time to see, do they get it? In fact, the thing about NotebookLM and this generate conversation, it's just it's not like a prompt that you have to. It's just a button. It's literally just like, oh, here's your sources, and by the way, it's really flexible. You can deselect certain sources. So again, it's a really great tool. But this podcast that's generated, or this conversation that's generated, is just a button. I don't think you can prompt it like focus on this or like don't talk about that. I think it's just, if you want this conversation, it's all or nothing. You just click the button.
Better believe that's coming soon.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, I think in that update that because just a few days ago, Google said they were, going to be unleashing another update of NotebookLM, and I can't remember the specifics now, but maybe there was something about customizing the conversation more than
so.
just
I think that's going to be on the horizon right now.
But yeah, that'll be super interesting in the next one to see does it.
But
first of all, just to know, like, is that the episode where we talked about it? Because I know we did. I know we talked about this WASP thing. So
I don't remember. I think it was just me thinking through the stages of, I think it was a 3 podcast arc, something like that. I think we did that. So I think probably so, but I can't bet on that. But what I would like to wrap up on, if I may, is the overarching, I'm going to use this word very intentionally right now again, overarching understanding that the NotebookLM is getting of the story, in that it perceives this as like a zombie show, but not like a zombie show. And it's really diving deep, I believe, into that compare and contrast module that I think is fascinating for a podcast. Like, it's on point. It's like it's pertinent to 2 people just having a conversation about this thing. So it's not the level of first this happened, then that happened, and then this happened, then that happened.
Yeah.
Which it could easily do. It's on this other level of an ability to grasp. It's like a zombie movie in this regard, but it's totally different than a zombie movie in this other regard. And that might make it. I really appreciated that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, sweet. Well, again, thank you so much for listening. Let us know what you think about this NotebookLM stuff. Sendingpoets@gmail.com. We'll close here with, again, these conversations. They do end nice. They wrap them up, pretty nicely. And the final line on here on this one was really gnarly to me. It was keep those brains safe out there. Wow.
That's a great tagline, by the way. We should add that.
Yeah. Keep those brains safe out there. Actually, that could be fun. Yeah.
Could be fun.
So you think you've heard every zombie story out there. Think again. Get ready to dive into Pumpkinheads.
Buckle up. This one's a doozy.
Yeah, this deep dive is going to be a wild ride. But hey, at least we're not facing down a horde of, well, whatever these Pumpkinheads are in real life.
Right. From what I've gathered, this isn't your typical zombie apocalypse.
Okay, so before we get to the really gruesome stuff, give us the rundown. What are we dealing with here? What are these Pumpkinheads?
It's a parasitic situation. Alien, actually. But, and here's the really clever part, the story never comes right out and says it.
Oh, I see. It's like show, don't tell.
Right, exactly. Viewers are putting the pieces together at the same time the characters are, which really amps up the suspense. Think meteor shower, then strange new illness popping up.
Oh, okay. I'm already creeped out. It's like it could actually happen,
That's the brilliance of this concept. It takes those primal fears and blends them with a healthy dose of what if?
So if it's not zombies, how does this parasitic nightmare spread? Is it like a bite or something? What are we talking about here?
Let's just say projectile vomiting is a key part of the infection process. Not pretty, right?
Ugh, no, not pretty at all. I could already tell this is going to be messing with my dreams tonight.
Oh, and it gets worse. Unlike your typical zombie, these infected, they keep their intelligence, at least for a while.
Okay, now that is scary. So instead of just mindless eating machines, we're talking about something that can, think and strategize?
Precisely. Imagine feeling those first flu-like symptoms, but your mind. Crystal clear. In fact, the parasite actually seems to amplify intelligence, making you even more cunning.
So no shambling, groaning hordes. These infected can blend in.
At least for a time, yeah. They use those smarts to manipulate and deceive. It's a whole different level of terrifying.
So all those zombie survival tactics we've learned from movies and shows?
Yeah, toss those out the window.
Aim for the head, right? Not in this case.
Let's just say aiming for the head is not recommended. Remember, bodily fluids are highly contagious. You bash a pumpkinhead skull open, you're basically setting off a gruesome sprinkler system of infectious goo.
Okay, you win. Point taken. So no headshots. Got it. This infection, it sounds like it's a multi-stage nightmare, right?
Absolutely. As the parasite takes hold, the host's appearance, well, let's just say undergoes a horrifying transformation. Picture this. The head swelling, becoming grotesquely enlarged, and taking on this vibrant, almost glowing pumpkin orange color.
Okay, yeah. Hence the name Pumpkinheads.
You got it. But it doesn't stop there.
It gets worse.
Oh, much worse. Think of it like this. The final act of a fully infected pumpkinhead is an explosive release of pressure, showering everything in a wave of highly infectious material. Talk about going out with a bang.
Oh, that's just messed up. So we're not just talking about a virus here. We're talking about walking, ticking time bombs. And not the kind you can defuse with a pair of wire cutters.
And you thought regular zombies were bad.
Right. At least with zombies, you kind of knew what you were getting.
Yeah.
This is a whole different level of horror.
Oh, absolutely. You're not just battling a physical threat, but an enemy that can blend in, manipulate you, and ultimately explode in a shower of biological terror.
You've definitely painted a pretty terrifying picture here. And I thought I'd heard it all when it came to zombie stories.
Just wait, it gets even better.
This is what really gets me about this concept, you know? It's not just about the monster, it's about who the monster is after.
You've got that right. The story zeroes in on a single family, kind of a microcosm of humanity facing the unthinkable, right?
And the writers really make you feel for these characters. We're not talking about your typical one-dimensional horror movie archetypes. These are real people, you know?
Yeah.
Like Dad, he's a Bering Sea crab fisherman. Tough as nails, I bet. Probably wrestled a few king crabs in his day.
Definitely battle-hardened, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But underneath that tough exterior, he's deeply devoted to his family. Which, you know, it just makes what happens to him even more tragic.
Yeah, I bet. And Mom. She's holding down the fort while he's gone. She's got to be just as tough as he is in her own way.
Oh, absolutely. Fiercely protective of her kids. The ultimate mama bear, you know? And she's the one who's forced to make this impossible choice, a choice no parent should ever have to make. It really highlights the moral complexities of this new world, you know? What do you do when there are no good options?
It's like the weight of the world is suddenly on her shoulders. Man, this just keeps getting more and more intense. And we haven't even talked about the kids yet. There's the oldest son. Sounds like he's still trying to find his way. Bit of a grunge era throwback, huh?
Yeah, kind of a drift. He's a college dropout, still trying to figure out who he is, what he wants to do with his life. You get the sense that he's always felt a little overshadowed by his father, you know? Like he can never quite live up to those expectations.
Yeah, a lot of our listeners can probably relate to that, I'd imagine. The pressure to live up to your parents' dreams, or even just figure out what your own dreams are.
For sure. And then we've got the twins. Talk about your classic high school experience, but with an apocalyptic twist. You've got the popular twin, the queen bee, head cheerleader type. But even she, you get the sense that she sees through the superficiality of it all.
Oh, I bet. It's like, deep down, she knows that none of that high school stuff really matters, but she's still got to play the game, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And what about her twin?
Complete opposite. The smart one, a bit of a bookworm, wise beyond her years, you know, it's like she sees the world through this really clear lens. And of course, there's the youngest, the baby of the family. He's the innocent one.
Oh, yeah. The one you just want to protect from all the horrors the world's about to throw at him. But in this case, there's no protecting anyone, is there?
Not really, no. And that's what makes the story so powerful. Each character, with their own flaws and complexities, becomes this lens through which we experience this terrifying new world. And their relationships to each other, the bonds that are tested and broken and sometimes even reforged in all of this chaos, that's where the real horror lies.
It's like this horrific character study set against the backdrop of an alien apocalypse. And I can't forget to mention the whole Groundhog Day element. We're not just seeing this outbreak once, but multiple times through the eyes of each family member, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's this brilliant narrative device. Every episode focuses on a different family member's point of view. And each time one of them dies, the story loops back to the beginning of the outbreak. Only this time, we're seeing it through someone else's eyes.
So, like, we're piecing this horrifying puzzle together, one character's experience at a time.
Exactly. And it keeps you on the edge of your seat. You're just waiting for the other shoe to drop, wondering who's next, you know, and how their choices might change things.
It really is like you're living through this nightmare along with them. Each time thinking, okay, maybe this time it'll be different, but knowing deep down it probably won't.
Are there any scenes that really stick out? You know, the ones that just burrowed under your skin and stayed there? There are a bunch, but the one that always comes to mind is this really unsettling scene with a neighborhood barbecue. You know, it's such a normal, everyday thing. Families hanging out, kids running around, burgers on the grill. It's like this perfect little slice of Americana. Until, well, it isn't.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Talk about a gut punch, right? You're lulled into this false sense of security. Everyone's happy and relaxed. Then, boom, the horror show begins.
Exactly. And it's subtle at first. One of the guests, this woman, she starts acting a little off. Nothing too crazy, just kind of giddy, like maybe she had one too many beers.
Oh, no. I bet it's not the beer.
Nope. Definitely not the beer. It escalates pretty quickly, though, and it becomes horrifyingly clear that she's one of the infected.
And because we know what we do about these parasites, especially in those early stages, she's probably still got enough lucidity to use that, well, that charm to spread the infection. Yeah.
It's a pretty terrifying example of just how insidious this parasite is. It doesn't just take over your body. It weaponizes your personality, your relationships, even your kindness. And in a setting like that, a crowded barbecue where people are just relaxing, not really paying attention, let's just say it's not going to be pretty.
And that's where we see the family, already struggling, get torn apart even more.
Right?
With this new threat.
Yeah. Dad's trying to protect everyone, be the hero, but he ends up getting infected by the neighbor. It's brutal.
Man, knowing what we know about these characters, about their relationships, it's like watching a train wreck in slow motion. And because of that Groundhog Day element, we're going to be forced to relive that barbecue multiple times through the eyes of each family member. Can you imagine the emotional toll? To keep reliving that same traumatic event each time with a new understanding of just how bad things are going to get.
It really makes you question everything. How do you even begin to process that kind of trauma, you know? Especially when you're constantly reliving it.
Definitely gives a whole new meaning to the phrase stuck in a loop. It's like this terrifying feedback loop of grief and horror. But it's not all just blood and guts, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that there are some really thought-provoking themes woven throughout this story.
Oh, absolutely. One of the big ones is definitely the fragility of normalcy. 1 minute you're enjoying a barbecue, the next minute your entire world is turned upside down.
It's like they say, we're only 9 meals away from anarchy.
Right. This story takes that idea and runs with it. It makes you realize how quickly things can fall apart, how thin that veneer of civilization really is.
Definitely makes you think twice about complaining about traffic, right? What other big ideas are at play here?
The whole us versus them dilemma is a big one. But even that's kind of flipped on its head, you know, because who's the real monster here? Is it the infected, driven by this primal need to spread the parasite? Or is it the uninfected, the ones who are pushed to the brink of their own humanity in order to survive?
It's like, where do you draw the line? And who gets to decide where that line is drawn? Those are some heavy questions. And speaking of things that make you think, there was this one detail that really stuck with me. Something about a WASP injection system.
Oh, yeah. That's a small detail, but it's one of those things that just gets under your skin. It adds this layer of, well, plausibility to the whole thing, you know?
Yeah.
For those who don't know, a WASP injection system is a real thing. It's a device that's used to deliver venom, usually by insects.
Okay, now that is just messed up. Knowing that something like that actually exists out there in the real world, it just makes the whole Pumpkinhead concept even more terrifying, you know?
Absolutely. It's not just a monster movie anymore. It's like this terrifying glimpse into a very real possibility. And that's what makes this concept so compelling. It's horror that stays with you long after the credits roll.
It makes you wonder what other horrors are lurking just below the surface of our everyday lives, right? Things that we don't even want to think about. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. But I have a feeling this is one conversation that's going to stay with us for a while. Until next time, keep those brains safe out there.